We have a vast virtual court platform already with, I think, and Lucio know better, 140 virtual courts deployed around the state. And we still continue to use that platform to conduct a lot of our court business. Certainly pretrial status conferences, trial management conferences, those short matters are certainly done virtually. Some hearings that aren't intense with evidence is done virtually. So you'll have a court with a screen similar to the layout here with lawyers and parties appearing on a screen virtually to assist the public where there might be they might not have the either bandwidth or the hardware. We've also deployed around the state what we call out rooms or kiosks where they could participate in these remote proceedings if they don't in fact have the hardware themselves. So we continue to do that, and we actually are continuing to build our virtual platform. It's certainly not going away. It's, jury trials and in long trials with lots of evidence, those are still being done in person. But if you look at who we brought to our courthouses pre-pandemic, 7 million people were screened through our courthouses pre-pandemic. Now we're about 2.5, 3 million. And I'm hoping that's because we're way more efficient and we're meeting people on the virtual platform as opposed to bringing them into court. It's a great convenience for those who, may have a matter that takes 10, 15 minutes, and before they had to take the morning off from work or get a babysitter or what now they could engage in the process much more efficiently.
Thanks so much for your good work.
Thank you.
Any questions? Senator Wong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Judge Bizzuto. Thank you for your great work even before becoming the Chief Administrative Judge, supporting Judge Carroll. Thank you for your work. It's great to see you in that position right now.
Thank you.
It's important for us to note this is the few contacts that we have as co-equal branches of government. We kind of impact you by controlling the purse strings.
You sure do.
But I am fully respectful of the equal branches of government, and I thank you for your service.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I also want to acknowledge the thanks that the struggles and challenges that you've had in growing dockets and challenges during COVID, of being able to administer your court proceedings. So compliments all the way around. I'm looking at the current budget and funding. You've gotten some allocations from the governor's budget, but it seems like the governor's budget for 24-25 doesn't really address the exteriors and the infrastructure requests that you've made. Can you elaborate a little bit? Seems to be a common theme that, for many of our physical structures within the state, that we're kind of delaying that physical improvement, and it's gotten to a point of disrepair, and it's costing more to update it when it's beyond that point. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
So I certainly can't take credit for where we are now, but I know we have a staff that's very good at keeping on top of things. So we certainly don't have dilapidated facades. We have a chiller in New Haven that absolutely has to be replaced very soon. But we've really done a good job at keeping up on anything. I'm going to turn it over to Lord Givino, who is the director of facilities, who is on the, if I have a question at 3 o'clock in the morning about a building that's got to be ready for next morning, Lord Givino's up and answering that phone call. So she's certainly our resident expert. She's brand new in this position. As you guys probably know, we've lost many to retirement. But she has taken the reins and taken over, and she's really a terrific asset. She could much better answer your question. She guides me through this, to be quite honest with you. So,
thank you.
Laura, thank you.
Thank you very much, Judge. We do have many buildings with the 38 buildings. We have a robust preventive maintenance program. So we do try to keep up on our mechanicals and building envelopes. Like anything, they age out. So we prioritize what will close down court, what would make a building unsafe for its occupants and employees. So if we can repair it and buy something maybe 3 or 4 years while we are replacing another piece of equipment in a building that can no longer be repaired, then that is how we prioritize. As I say, as Judge Bizzuto said, we just finished a roof project. We have many other projects in design. And so, yeah, we do the best we can with the staff that we have and the money available.
Thank you, ma'am. Welcome. You mentioned in your second section about security. Obviously, it's an important consideration. Having visited the courthouses in the various districts, there's one way in. and the only way for everybody to go through. You had written in your testimony, there's a contemplation of a separate entranceway. Could you elaborate a little bit more on what the cost bearing is on that and the rationale for that?
So I could give you the background. I'm going to turn the cost over to Laura, but Bridgeport GA2, I'm not sure if any of you have been there, but it's one of the very old courthouses that we have. And if you recall pre-pandemic, shortly before the pandemic, there was an awful shooting right on the courthouse steps. And it was our marshals who jumped into action, literally dragging bloody bodies into our foyer. It was really traumatizing for the staff as well as the judges. And there's really no barrier to getting in and out of that building. So what we're talking about here is creating, we call it hardening the front entrance. So there's some sort of delay before that person actually gets into the building and provides some sort of barrier before the people are screened. So that I could turn over to you as far as cost and where we are with that process, but that was the first building that we said we had to absolutely secure the exterior of that building to make it safe for, not only our staff and judges, but certainly these were for standby people who were related to a case that was going on in the courthouse. Someone drove by and shot 4 people down. I think luckily they all survived, but it was a horrific event and really shows kind of the vulnerability we have in some of our older buildings. And as Laura indicated, that's that particular location and hardening that exterior is a priority, as well as there's a number of other security efforts that we're doing, but that has to do with hardening the infrastructure. So Laura, as far as
it's currently under design. The building is on the historic registry, so it extends the design process going through SHPO and the other administrative bodies. But we are going to be creating space by taking over an office, making that a dedicated weapons screening section. I would have to, if I had to ballpark it, I would say somewhere between 500,000 and $1 million. Between the construction and it's being an old building, and we were also going to expand the camera system, and bulletproof glass and all the rest. So yeah, I would say between $500,000 and $1 million.
Judge Pizzuto, does the judicial branch have a prioritization of the projects? In talking to the Board of Regents system, they had their prioritization of the various projects 1 through 5. Does the judicial branch have their prioritization in regards to various projects? You mentioned the Bridgeport location and the hardening of that security is preeminent. Do you have an available list of prioritization that you can offer this subcommittee?
we do, and we could get that to you. And we follow unless there's some emergency and then something goes up the top, but we structure out a prioritization list.
Thank you. And I want to echo the good chair's focus on understanding technology. COVID has brought on a new opportunity for many of us. We've got colleagues that are zooming in, but obviously it's got to be offered with security and protection in regards to the interaction. So I want to acknowledge the good chair and echo his concerns on technology. But I also want to compliment you, Judge. You're right, like a judge, clear and concise. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Moore, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation coming before us. I remember Judge Carroll came before us and was so grateful that we gave him some money to fix some, I think it was a Bridgeport courthouse needed some, and he had been asking for it a long time, and we finally released the dollar for him. I actually live here in Bridgeport, and I know about the incident you're talking about with the shooting and the drive-by. And I was just wondering, I heard that you're looking at upgrading some of these buildings, but Bridgeport is one example of not being prepared for something that we should have known, or we as legislators should have known that was possible, and it's possible to happen any place in the state. Are there any other courthouses that do not have that type of, what you're doing for Bridgeport, who that don't have that type of security?
Well, I know there are assessments currently going on for a new courthouse in Bridgeport as well as New Haven. Those are probably 2 of the courthouses that present some challenges as providing security to the patrons who come to the court, as well as our employees and judges. If you look at some courthouses out in the Tallinn Judicial District, they certainly could probably use some help with respect to hardening our exteriors to provide security. You know, we have a lot of courthouses. If I had, you know, a magic wand, there'd be 6 brand new courthouses in the state of Connecticut servicing all of the public. But we do as best we can with the buildings that were provided. And Laura, you might have something more to add with respect to those courthouses that are on the list for hardening the exteriors.
Yes, we did a study of Hartford, New Haven, Waterbury, and Bridgeport. So those were the courthouses that were older vintage that we were looking to see and highly used or heavy volume in each of those courthouses.
And will we see them on your priority list? Or do you know?
Yes, there were improvements made to camera systems already where we have upgraded camera systems and added them to the Marshall's command center. So some improvements have been made already. Out of that study of 6, we did choose Bridgeport as the first one to begin our upgrade, the security upgrade, our hardening.
Thank you. Thank you for your responses. Thank you all for coming today before us. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Moore. Rep. Piscopo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it and welcome, Your Honor, and appreciate your presentation. I admit to some biases here. The Piscopos are very fond of the Bizzuto family, so the whole family. I was your dad's intern when he was a state senator here, so not too long ago.
I remember your dad. I remember your dad fondly over the house many times. They
Is
not
it-
only connected as, you know, colleagues in this house, but they were proud Italians for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is very concise. It was very well written testimony, and I think you summed it up. But I just want to follow up on our Senate rankings question on facilities, just so it helps me read the budget better. Your proposal. You have requests, and the governor has met those requests in the first 15 million. And then you have a list of other unallocated mechanical improvements in New Haven, Stamford, exterior improvements in New Haven. And are you going to be able to do those with the unallocated funds? Is that what we have in mind here?
Yes, we anticipate being able to fulfill that with the unallocated balances.
Okay. That's good to know because we won't go after those, so to speak. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your questions. Representative Farr.
Thank you, Chairman. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. I did have a question to follow up. I appreciated some of the detail about where the ADA improvements were going to be made, and also the note of the checklist process that it sounded like you all were going to go through. But it made me kind of question, do you know out of the 38 courthouses you currently have, how many are fully ADA compliant at this time, or are none of them fully ADA compliant?
As the ADA codes, the courthouses were built to the ADA code at that time. So I would say Torrington is the most ADA compliant, followed closely by Stamford and New Britain, just based on their age. We have done improvements as code changes or drastic changes. The checklist will really give us an opportunity to see where we could do better. So yes, we look forward to that. And then we will prioritize by what we can do quickly and then what would make the most impact.
Okay, so the intent of doing the checklist is that by this time next year, you might have more information that's more prioritized around those
Yes, all the
improvements.
assessments will be done by this fall.
Okay,
And then we can start putting our priority list together.
okay, that would be super helpful. I think a lot of us, kind of go through our lives assuming that all the buildings we enter that are state buildings are ADA compliant. And as you noted, we have a ways to go. So I appreciate that information and look forward to the update. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. Representative Baumgartner.
Yes, my two questions became one after Representative Farrar's great line of questioning. So really happy to hear about the path to ADA compliance across all of your courthouses. Many of our courthouses in Connecticut are historic buildings built centuries ago, or at least over 100 years ago. Down in New London, for example, quite historic as well. I was curious if you could speak to any potential funding due to the historic nature of those buildings to defray some of the costs for capital projects down the road.
That's a great question. As you know, we said we're starting a renovation exterior on the Bridgeport Courthouse, which is on the Historic Registry. I'm gonna turn to Laura to see if there's any additional funding from other sources, given its designation as historic.
Typically, we do just use state bond funds for our renovations, whether it's from the allocation or the authorization for ADA, or if it's from just infrastructure repairs. So yes, typically we rely on the state bond funds.
Do you know if you could leverage any like federal historic tax credits or any of those programs?
That I am not sure about. I don't have an answer for that, but we can certainly look into that.
Brian's writing it down. We'll look into that.
All right, thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Brian.
Thank you for your good questions. Any further questions? Just one last question. The Torrington facility, is that finally complete?
It's complete. It's
Yeah, great.
beautiful.
Great.
Yeah. If you ever have an opportunity to visit, I would encourage you to do so.
Is that our newest one?
That would be the newest one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Judge, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you
and
very
thanks for
much
the
for your
good work that you and all your
consideration.
staff are doing. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's what they were scheduled for.
Mr. Chair,
Senator Moore?
the next one is scheduled at 3 o'clock. Is that correct?
It is, yes. So our staff is calling upstairs to legislative management to see if they can come down a little bit earlier.
Thank you.
Sure. I just want to thank the members of this committee because of your incisive and informative questioning. We are running a little bit ahead of schedule. So in about 15 to 20 minutes, legislative management will be down here to testify. Thanks again for all your work.
That's only because I didn't torch you, Representative Napoli. I was smart enough to limit the questions for a change. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Nothing
Highly
like insurance
appreciated.
Yesterday.
Okay, so we will reconvene the bonding subcommittee meeting. We want to thank the good folks from legislative management for coming down here a little bit earlier. We really appreciate your efforts. And if you want to just begin by introducing yourselves to the committee and then begin your presentation. Thank you for being here.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Senator Moore, Representative Napoli, Senator Huang, Representative Piscopo, members of the subcommittee. My name is Jim Tamburo. I am the Executive Director of the Joint Committee on Legislative Management. We're very happy to be here today and thank you for having us. As we mentioned earlier, we thank you for the nice short commute because it was a nice, easy ride down the elevator for us. Let me introduce my team that's with me today. I have Chris Perillo. Chris is our Financial Administrator in Legislative Management. You may know Chris or recognize Chris from his 20+ years at OFA, which he brings to us and since July 1st of last year. So we're happy to have him. Next to Chris is Brian Pence. Brian is our new Facilities Administrator. Brian joined us in June of last year after a long and successful career at Hartford Healthcare. And on the end is Sue Skian. Sue is our Financial Services Supervisor, and Sue is in charge of everything behind the scenes for the most part. So all the work that we're going to share with you today, Sue's been sharpening her pencil and digging in deep. So we appreciate that. I'll just gonna have a couple quick words and then I'll pass it along to Chris to go through in more detail. But our budget request is for an extensive exterior restoration of the state capitol. Historically, and if you recall, the capitol was completed in 1879. So for the opening day of session, 1879, the capitol opened. Approximately 100 years later, we did a very extensive external and internal restoration project that lasted 10 years into the late 80s. This today, what we're asking for would be the first major restoration project since those late 80s. So we submitted written testimony last week. I'm sure you all have. And I'm going to turn it over to Chris to provide you with details regarding that testimony.
Thanks, Jim. I just first want to start off with, if maybe Bree can put up the picture. You might have gotten this calendar a month or so ago from NCSL, and we were just sort of looking through it. And I first looked through it to find our capital, but then I flipped to July and I looked at Trent, New Jersey. And I don't know if you can see it up there, if we have some handouts, but it's a picture of the capital of New Jersey, and you can see that it needs a lot of work. And this, the reason why we're here is we don't want to have the situation where you see the gold dome is turning colors, the columns. And so that's why we're asking for this bond request. We're looking for 20 million in FY24, an additional 15 million in FY25 for basically a top to bottom restoration of the exterior state capitol. The granite, the marble, the relief in the gold dome, stirring up the lantern, the drums. It's a really big project. Right now, we have contracted with an architectural and engineering firm for a study that's going to be completed in July, but they gave us, when we found out we were coming before you, we reached out to them late last week and they gave us an ROM, or a rough order of magnitude of the project. And right now they're estimating if we started in 24, it would cost $44 to $54 million for exterior renovation of the Capitol. And those costs escalate pretty quickly if if that gets delayed with, inflationary costs and some supply chain issues. So it kind of grows appreciably the longer you delay, which is some of the things you guys were talking about earlier today, when you defer things and how it increases the cost in the out years. So that's, again, in July, we're gonna get that report from the firm. They just gave us some numbers right now. If you have any questions about that project.
I would say, why don't you just conclude your overall presentation, and then we'll ask questions at that point, okay?
Sure. Eric Michael Gray from OFA asked us to put together some stuff. So in our handout, we were asked about projects with unallocated balances, and I'm just gonna kind of quickly go through our written testimony. We, back in PA 20-1, we received bond funding of 15 million. To date, 7.1 of that has been allocated. 5 million of that was for a project related to sort of scope of work for the Capitol exterior restoration. 1.5 million was for the Capitol area loop, and 600,000 was for the Senate chamber voice and audio system. The next project was 4.8, and unallocated balance that includes 250,000 for the old State House improvements, 500,000 to move the Genius statue to the top of the Capitol Dome. There's 2 million for additional upgrades to the Capitol complex. That was for projects that were approved at December 9th bond commission, and the remaining 2.1, we're hoping to bundle that for part of the Capitol future project exterior. After that, we had the legislative bill drafting for LCO that has a $2 million unallocated balance. The old State House windows, $850,000 unallocated balance. And lastly, for the unallocated balance, we have in conjunction with the loop, the heating loop installation, we're gonna do the sidewalks and the parking lots and the roadways around, repave the roadways around the Capitol and the LOB. Projects with allocated funding, this was just project from the December 9th bond commission just a few short months ago. The Capitol area, that's the CAS loop. That's the heating and cooling loop that the LOB and the State Office Building are already on. We want to connect the Capitol to that. I mentioned before, the Senate chamber voice and audio, 600,000, hearing room upgrade, 630,000. LOB west entrance, that's the visitor entrance to LOB, 800,000. And we did this past summer and fall, a $2+ million project in the garage, and in that we ran out of some time just because of weather, but we were additional 500,000 when they were there for some garage repairs in the LOG garage.
Great. So thank you for that. Just a few questions and we'll start now, if that's okay with all of you. Okay, great. So elevators in the Capitol, are they part of the plan?
That was part of, there was funding for that in, let me make sure I get the right one. And PA, the 2 million from PA 22-118. We also asked for before the appropriations committee for the biennial budget, we asked for $2 million in minor capital to try and get it moving faster. So yes, that is something that we want to do, all three in the Capitol. So
That's great,
I'm not sure what pot it's going to come from of money, but absolutely.
but it is in the plans. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's great. Okay. Your written testimony, you talked about repairs to the old State House. What is important that we do repairs there for?
So legislative management has care and control of that building.
Okay,
So that's the same way we have care and control of the Capitol and the LOB. That's sort of the third building we take care of. Brian can give you some more detail on that, but that's the windows, that's the facade.
So it's windows and it's a lot of brownstone work. So brownstone work, the brownstone, as you know, is a soft material. It's deteriorating at a rapid rate. There really hasn't been any repairs to the brownstone. So we're trying to cut costs on that and procure some of the brownstone from other projects going on in the state and utilize that to make the repairs. But nonetheless, it's still an expensive process. And the windows, we can't get parts for them anymore. They're failing. So there's some there's plywood in places there to take place of windows where they failed. It's just not a good representation of that old state house here. So thank you for your answer. My next question is, as legislators, one of our favorite things to do is to give Capitol tours to our constituents. And when we get to the genius, we love having that conversation, whether it's myth or fact, whether that the genius is at the top of the dome. And I see in your testimony that your goal is to have the genius back up there. What's a timetable on that? What does that look like?
Well, we're actively working on it. The lantern is going to be part of the capital restoration. So that work is going to be completed. Right now, we're working on the Genius. They're doing x-rays on it. We're not sure what the base is since it was instilled, encapsulated in that marble box, if you would call it. We don't know what the support mechanism is in there. So we're trying to discover what that mechanism is. So when we put it back on top of the Capitol, it's there for many, many years to come. It was there for many years after they built the Capitol, but that system failed. So we want to improve upon that. But if that all goes well and the studies come back as we hope they will, it's a pretty quick process actually to put the Genius back up there.
Thank you very much for your answers. Any further questions from members of the subcommittee? Senator Moore.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for that. Napoli took a couple of my questions, but I want to go a little bit deeper. First, I want to tell you how much I love our buildings, and when I go out of state, many times I try to see other people's state houses. I've actually been to the top of in Boston, and I still think ours compares to no other, and I love it. And I am very proud that people do come to the Capitol and they're in awe of what it looks like and how well it's taken care of. So I thank you all for that. But I want to go back to the elevators because I don't understand what the problem is with the elevators besides that they're old, but what can be done to make them more efficient? It takes forever for them to come. I actually tripped and broke my foot in 2021 getting off the elevator where it wasn't level. What's the problem?
So just for clarity, are you speaking about the LOB or the Capitol elevators?
I'm talking about the LOB.
Okay, so the LOB elevators, we have a vendor currently, Schindler Elevators, that does the work on those cars. They're Otis cars. So there's always a conflict about getting parts for them. And most recently, it's been the cards that control the elevators. They are the cards that send the signal from top to bottom. So the car knows where to go, when to stop, and how to level itself. The cards are faulty and need to come from Otis, and they're back ordered. They need to be reburned. So we do think that the fix is relatively close. We are looking at also perhaps moving on to Otis for our new vendor when this contract term comes up. But currently that's the problem with those elevators, and we do know what their problem is, and they can be fixed. It's just waiting on getting those cards.
So I'm glad to hear they can be fixed because I was wondering, were you thinking of replacing them?
For the most part, those cars are have been rebuilt as far mechanically speaking. So ropes, which is the lift mechanism in there, the pistons inside, those are and were replaced and upgraded. What we're talking about here is really just the communication cards.
Mm-hmm.
What you experienced where it wasn't level, communication card did not send the right signal up as to where that car should stop appropriately. And that's why you experienced that non-level situation where you almost tripped coming off. Also, you notice the voices. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Sometimes the stop signals on the floor, you don't know that the elevator has arrived at your floor. That's all part of that one card system.
And sometimes it just bypasses the floor and takes you someplace you didn't want to go.
Yeah, sometimes it bypasses the floor. I've been stuck many times standing there looking like a complete fool because the car came and went. I didn't know it was there. So,
Yeah. And so then the Old State House, is it open?
yes,
And it's open to the public?
yes.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Moore. Representative Piscopo?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming downstairs. Appreciate it. I brought the governor's budget, so I always try and look up the agency that's in front of us, and I don't see you guys. I see a bunch of unallocated funds in your budget and not a lot of, and some of your requests, but I don't see any governor recommendations for the next 2 years. Can you enlighten me on that, or?
That's a great question. We submitted our budget. Historically, the legislative management does not submit their budget at the same time as executive branch agencies. It's part of the process we have to go to for leadership approval. So we did not meet the OPM deadline that they have for executive branch agencies, but we did submit what you have before us is what we asked OPM. I'm assuming that's why they didn't put it in, but I'm not really sure, to be honest with you, why it didn't make it in, but we did submit it to OPM.
I understand. Thank you for that answer. I was a little bit perplexed on that. And then was the figure you gave for the exterior improvements of the Capitol 44 million, did you say?
So what we received from as preliminary estimate from the architectural and engineering firm was a range of 44 to 54 million dollars. Their final report's not due to us until July. So candidly, I wouldn't be surprised if that number changed a little bit before then.
Okay, and can I, then I could assume your requests are. Okay, I don't see your request for anything for the state capitol complex except for a $4.8 million unallocated.
At the top of the handout, we put this together in the fall. That's correct. So we put this estimate together in the fall, and we were trying to, at that point, we had just contracted with the firm. And we basically, Brian, Sue, Jim and myself made an educated guess.
Okay,
So we had 15 million appropriate in bond funding from PA 20-1. And we sort of, from Brian with his experience, we estimated we might need an additional 35 million. And that's how we came to, we thought the exterior renovation could cost 50. So we had 15 earlier, and we asked for 20 plus 15, so we asked for 35. We thought the previous allocation of 15 plus a 24 request of 20 and a 25 request of 15 totals 50. End up pretty close to what the architectural firm is estimating.
thank you. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, everybody.
Representative Farrar.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being with us. I like the color stands out from the rest of our papers. A couple questions just to follow up on our favorite topic, which I think is always elevators. Going back to the plans for the Capitol elevators, I do recall conversations we've had in the last 2 years about them. So kind of curious at what kind of are the challenges associated with them that have held up some of the kind of improvements there, or is there something more that has to be done with this future funding that hasn't been shared previously? Thanks.
So we did enter into an agreement with the company to come in here and assess the quality of the maintenance being done on the elevators, particularly in the Capitol.
Mhm.
The elevator inspectors that we have here, most of them in the state of Connecticut are part-time, and they don't get around to all the buildings to do a proper analysis. Unless there's work that was done, then they have to come in. But normally to do a regular maintenance walkthrough, they don't do those. We hired into a company to make sure that we were paying for a service through Schindler, and we were getting what we were paying for.
Mhm.
So we're waiting for that analysis to come back on it. from what we've been told from Schindler, and we have no reason not to believe them, but we want to just double check them. The cars are in great shape. Well, if we go backwards to right around the time I started here, P1, which is one closest to the center of the building,
Mhm.
was down for quite a long time.
Yeah,
And the current contractor said they couldn't repair it. So we went out to Otis, who manufactured the car from day one. They said they could fix it and they could get it up and running for us. But that the maintenance on that car was severely, it was in poor condition. So they were able to come in and do the analysis on it and get the car up and running. It was approved by the state elevator inspector, and the car is working today without fail. That's why we entered into the agreement with the new firm to just go through all of our elevators and really just give us a rundown of what do we need to do to these cars, if anything, maybe nothing. And that includes the travelators and it includes the escalators in the cap.
thank you. So it sounds like in the last couple of years, it was focused on that one car, and moving forward, there's going to be an assessment done on the other cars. So you all can make a determination of how
Yeah.
to best use those funds.
Yeah, it's beneficial for me just to get a baseline of where we stand
Okay,
within the LOB and the capital. What do we have for cars and what do we need to budget for in the future?
thank you. That's very helpful. I know, again, I think we're just so mindful of it when we bring visitors and seeing some of the that elevator and the one in particular you mentioned that was down for a long while. I think we all recognize it, we don't want to send the message that these
That's correct.
elevators are out of order, especially for visitors. So thank you for acknowledging that. And then I just have one other question, given the, proposal of, as you said, investing in this substantial but needed restoration for the exterior of our capital. And I appreciated also the examples of what other state capitals look like, because out of these, I'm telling you, ours is definitely top notch. But I did have a question, given the exterior restoration, has there been any consideration of, considering, I know there's been talk over the years of increasing the presence of more diverse statues on the exterior of our capital to more fully represent our state. Is that under consideration in this restoration project?
I can address that. That obviously this statue issue is something that we would look towards leadership to help us out with and determine next steps for that. I mean, I think we're all aware of what's been going on the last couple of years regarding statues. And certainly it's been brought up that, we would like more diversity up on the building. So I think we're looking at, discussions that need to be had with leadership to see where they want to go with that.
So you'd be open to that type of discussion associated with this restoration project?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
And also involving the Restoration and Preservation
Commission.
Commission too. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all for
welcome.
acknowledging that and for being here today. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your questions. Senator Wong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, and thank you for your work on behalf of this entire building and the staff that works in supporting the legislative body. A big portion of your presentation is about exterior, but I find it very interesting that in this new age of Zoom hybrid meetings, our hearing rooms are adapting to new formats. For example, you're looking at this screen to interact with our colleagues via Zoom, whereas certain rooms have a small camera, we have our camera. But I'm reading through your allocations that you don't have a lot of new hybrid technology updates in your budgeting. I see it for carpeting, I see it for the seal, I see it for the lines, but are there already allocations or plans in place to upgrade hearing rooms to accommodate the hybrid technology? And if not, will you be requesting budgetary allocation for the important work that we have to do in public hearings and committee meetings?
Good. Thank you, Senator. Brian, I'll just start that off real quick and you can take over on that. Yeah, obviously the last few years have been unprecedented, especially in this building. We went from everything in person to everything remote. Our IT department has done, I think we all agree, a phenomenal job in getting us up to speed as quickly as anybody could imagine. And they continue to do that throughout the course of the days here. And As we enter a hybrid world here, I guess now that might be the future. I'm not sure, but we continue to make changes within the hearing rooms. You'll see in the smaller hearing rooms, they're starting to put in large screen TVs and taking out the screens and being able to better adapt to the remote access that we're getting for everybody. So it's a constant change that we're looking at. So we do have some money that we received, as Chris mentioned, I think it was 600,000 to improve the hearing rooms. And part of that is involved in there, but I'm going to let Brian get more specific on what exactly we're looking at moving forward.
Yeah, so part of our plan is to, Senator, exactly what you said, is to really enhance these rooms here, because they've fallen behind the times here with the video screen. So the 85-inch TVs on the wall, the small monitors, so that if you're sitting at the desk here, you can actually see your audience here without having to turn around. In some of the hearing rooms, we don't have this in every hearing room. It's difficult. So your audience is behind you. So that was the first step here. But the major thing, which is kind of behind the scenes that nobody sees, but you will notice it, is the video HD, the lighting, as well as the audio. So better sound, what your audience hears you when you're on a Zoom platform, everything, it balances out. So that's what we're kind of moving towards. It's difficult to do. We started that process with the 85-inch monitors and the small screen TVs. Those were quick fixes that we could do right away. A lot of this other work needs to be done during off session. So in the summer months there, so we can get into the floors and start, pulling wires. All new wires has to be done. There's copper cabling in here now that's antiquated, and it makes for poor quality of video and audio. So that'll all be fiber and Cat6. All those runs need to be pulled. So there's like 26 for each room to complete it. That's the small rooms. And I don't even know the number for one of the larger rooms, but.
And I understand the complexity of it all. And that's why I was asking if there are any requests for allocation. I see in the testimony that you've got 630,000 for legislative hearing room, but the description I'll just read from here is, replacing the hearing room walls, particularly around the seal, replacing the carpeting in the two rooms that become safety concerns, reupholstering the seat, and upgrading the video lines that you mentioned earlier. But I really don't see any description for the allocation of the 630 to creating a hybrid interaction system. Is that part of your plan, or is it additional funding allocation that's not reflected in this? Because obviously, if there's nothing else we do in this building as elected officials, is the public hearing and committee meetings, and having that interaction and the public interaction is critical. But I just want to ask, because if it's in your plans, it's not reflected in this allocation. And it is important to note that if we're going to consider being able to support you in your effort to help us do our job.
We, Senator, we requested for our general fund appropriation in the biennial budget, an additional $2 million in equipment. And that is pretty much exclusively for ITS department, for internal routers, Wi-Fi, includes general infrastructure for the building. So we're doing a little bit on the finance side, the bonding side, and a little bit on the general fund appropriation side. We're also going to be working with CTN to rewire all the televisions in everyone's office and stuff like that, because they're now HD. So the lines from, as probably when you look at your TV, it's sort of a little fuzzy and looks like it's straight out of 1989. So we're going to be pulling the wires and excuse me, running all new. Okay, I think they call it the hotel model or something like that.
That's correct. So when you go to a hotel, there's really no wires, there's infrastructure. It's all done through like a streaming platform. That's what our future will look like here. So that we'll have clear HD reception for each TV in your office and whatnot, as well as audio.
I appreciate that. So you're saying the 2 million that you've requested allocated kind of breaks down into that area. And I guess it may be the cliche of the cobbler doesn't always wear the shoes, from the standpoint that what you're doing. But I guess for my edification and request is maybe you can explain that a little bit better as to what's in our best interest as a legislative body to support your funding, because it really does help us do our job. But you're lumping it into 2 million without clarifying the avocation and the utilization of it. I'm just offering that as I'm reading through this testimony, I don't see that allocation, but thank you for clarifying that the $2 million IT does incorporate that. And I think it'd be helpful for us to understand that, just as you've done this in this testimony. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for your work.
Thank you for your question, Senator. Representative Baumgartner.
Thank you, Mr. Tamburo, and thank you to your team as well for joining us early as well. But I do have a few questions with respect to energy. Our heating system that we utilize here at the LOB, soon the Capitol will be joining the CAS loop. I understand that it operates off the loop runs off of natural gas. So currently, the state capitol, do they have a oil boiler that would be removed, and then can you just kind of explain that, what that process will look like? Oh, Brian, great tie.
Thank you. So currently, I'll try and make this brief for you. Currently, what we have in the Capitol is gas-fired boilers. Okay, we had 3. We are down to 1 now. The CAS system is going to give us some redundancy. So it is natural gas also, the CAS loop for heating, as well as absorption. So it uses natural gas to make cooling for us also. But it's all natural gas. We do not have any oil fired in the building. Everything is natural gas. It was oil at one point in time. It was a bunker oil to start with, very thick, heavy oil. Then it was converted to number 2 fuel oil, and then eventually converted to gas. And so that's currently what we have.
So the CAS loop has the capacity to take on the state capitol?
That's correct. So that will be a form of
Capitol complex?
redundancy in the future here.
Excellent. All right, and we'll stay on the state capitol complex proper for now. I saw that you're looking to, I think, put set aside $5 million for about $5 million for exterior alterations. I apologize, that's a catch also. That would include the technology upgrades as well. Can you speak to some of the outside improvements? I was just kind of curious about, like, if it was beautification or hardening the infrastructure.
Specifically for the Capitol.
Yes.
So what we're talking about here is cleaning. So that's really, there's a lot of emphasis on the cleaning of that, because if you look at the building, it's got mold on it, which is contributing to the deterioration of the stone. So cleaning and sealing it. The medallions, if you notice at the north steps of the medallion, one on the east side, is actually missing its whole lower bottom. That needs to be rebuilt, all new rebar put into it. So that's part of it, to bring it back to what it was. The historical value, it's defaced now. So we want to make that repair. That's where it's going to be going into. So it's not necessarily, there'll be fresh paint on the windows. So you'll notice that. You'll notice the green hue that's on the granite is not no longer will be there. So that's the beautification that we're talking about when we do this restoration. So it's a two-step part. First of all, it's removing the mold, it's repointing all the seams and joints and making sure they're waterproof again. And then it's also cleaning all the stone.
Okay. All right. And
Representative, I think a couple other things I'll add
Yes.
to Brian's thought is we've all been out on north steps and have noticed the sidewalks on north steps. I think we've had those lovely orange bike racks around there for about 5 years now. That was a project that we did probably 10 years ago that didn't work out as we anticipated. So that needs replacing, the sidewalks around there. The windows, I believe it's 522 windows need to be replaced. So that needs to get done. The gold dome needs to be redone. The flag poles.
yes.
So the 3 flag poles up there, if you look at them, the one in the middle, we're glad it's still standing. So and those need to be fixed as well and replaced. So it's things like that that are very obvious to see. And then there's other things that I'm sure the engineering firm will find for us that none of us actually notice, but we'll need to get done.
Yes. No, I understand that just there are some folks in Hartford that just within the state capitol complex, and now that we have so many different transit options, a lot of people actually get to the Capitol by taking the train, from, and so, and bus, rapid bus service. So there's some folks who they choose to bike as well. They have said that it can be difficult kind of going between the LOB and the Capitol. And so if there can be better kind of ingress and egress for the bikers, so that way they're safe as well. But my last question is regarding the technology. We've made a lot of investments in our technology, as you noted, because of the profound, times that we're in. But just with respect to the accessibility of our websites and the ability for our constituents to engage with us and to engage with the work that we're doing in the legislature, understanding when votes are being taken, and navigating all those different features. How often does OLM review what other states are doing or other legislature or state capitals with respect to technology improvements, so that way our constituents can more easily access the work we do on behalf of them?
Good question. Our IT director, Paul Alderucci, who's been around here for as long as I have, 25 plus years, is always in discussions with, certainly with New England states for sure. I know in the past they've held various programs and meetings together. And Paul and his crew are always looking for ways to improve what we do. I think kind of in the last few years, obviously, there's been one very big issue in front of us, and so they've been working on that nonstop. But there is opportunities that they have taken advantage of over the years. OFA has a program that we built. LCO has some information that they've used that we do, and the same with OLM and our HR system and our financial system. So they're constantly looking to see what we can do to upgrade. There is the National Conference of State Legislatures, obviously, that we are in touch with quite frequently to make sure that whatever's out there that we could possibly be taking advantage of, we do. So it's something that is on our list, kind of a constant situation we're looking at.
Excellent. And I appreciate the proactivity. I understand some of the garage repairs, you identified some unexpected damage, and so now obviously developing a plan to address that. So very much appreciate that. And then lastly, on the statute, the Genius in particular, I understand 2026 is our semi-quincentennial, or the 250-year anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And I think it'd be great if that was the year that happened. The state will be planning a lot of great events around the state, especially in our corner in Stonington, Groton, London, where it was very busy during the those days, of course. But I say let's put the Genius back on the Capitol and party like it's 1776.
Thank you for your questions. Certainly, thank you all for being here. As legislators and, non-legislative staff who really gets the work done around here, we are really honored and humbled to work in both these buildings, the Capitol and the LOB. Both are symbols of democracy for our state. And, the proactive work that you all do, keep them in shape. So we thank you so much for protecting that historical integrity. And we look forward to working with you very closely.
It's our pleasure. And as I'll close with, we're here to work for all of you and with all of you. So it's our pleasure as well. So thank you.
Okay, so just moving along here on our agenda, we are going to have our last state agency, the State Library. They are kind enough to join us online. Let me see here. I believe Deborah is muted. Bree, can we unmute Deborah? Hi, Deborah. How are you?
I
Thanks.
am good. Good afternoon.
Feel free to make a presentation to the subcommittee, and then we'll follow up with questions if that's okay with you.
Sounds great. Thank you all. So good afternoon, Senator Moore, Representative Napoli, Ranking Members Wong and Piscopo, and members of the General Obligation Bonding Subcommittee. I am State Librarian Deborah Schonder, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today and update you on the State Library's 3 proposed and existing projects. First, the new proposal before you, renovation of the Middletown Library Service Center. The State Library's Division of Library Development provides leadership, funding, education, and statewide services that enhance a local library's ability to deliver high-quality library service to their community. The 10,000 square foot Middletown Library Service Center was built in the 1960s and is a critical location for statewide library services that serve public, school, and academic libraries across the state. It houses the Connecticut Digital Library, the Connecticut Library for Accessible Books, our subject matter experts for all statewide library projects and programs, and the statewide technology training center. But the Middletown Library Service Center needs to repurpose and redefine its used and unused space to accommodate new technology and the increasing demand for training in the computer lab and in our meeting room. Due to a lack of adequate space, staff is often forced to turn away librarians who wish to participate in workshops and library groups who request meeting room space. Thanks in part to the state library's construction grants to public libraries, libraries of all types are updating and renovating their own spaces to meet the evolving needs of their patrons. The state library must be able to match their commitment in new ways of learning, teaching, and discovery by providing them with modern, technologically advanced space in which they can build their knowledge and skills. The proposed allocation of $400,000 in FY24 and $355,000 in FY25 will allow the state library to make priority renovations to Middletown, including 1, replacing an extremely energy inefficient HVAC system, partial central air, and window AC units. Most notably, during the summer months, the main part of the building, which houses the main lobby, the library collection stacks, and access to all offices and program rooms is not cooled at all. We plan to install an environmental control system that allows for real-time control of HVAC and lighting systems throughout the building. Next, we hope to replace egress doors in the computer lab in the meeting room. The doors are the original doors and are responsible for considerable energy loss. The meeting room doors do not lock properly, and therefore they are not ADA compliant. Rewire and install floors or ceiling outlets and ports to compensate for multiple computers and other technology. And finally, restrooms. The men's and women's restrooms are original to the 1960s, and they have those fixtures. We were proposing to expand the women's restroom by eliminating the men's restroom and including an ADA stall. They are touchless, and adding touchless efficient fixtures and touchless stalls will be installed as well. And finally, we hope to reconfigure the main floor where our collection is stored. This means removing 60 to 75% of the shelving, conducting a mass weeding of redundant collections, and the creation of modular sitting spaces. The space could then be used for larger interactive programming and workshops, as well as smaller meeting areas for professional librarians to use. Next, construction grants to public libraries. Per statute, the state library provides grants to public libraries for their own construction projects to create or improve usable space. These grants allow public libraries to not only improve their aging infrastructure, general deterioration, and meet ADA compliance needs, but also respond to the increasing need for flexible collaboration spaces to meet community use. All Connecticut libraries are eligible for these grants, and preference is given to libraries in distressed municipalities and to principal public libraries. Grants can be provided for up to half the total cost of a project, capped at $1 million, and libraries must raise the remaining funds through referendum, fundraising, donations, municipal capital projects, or other methods. Depending on the type of project chosen, they either have 1 or 3 years after the State Library Board approves it to secure their funding. And there is a statutory grant cycle with applications due on September 1st each year. 29 projects are currently active in this program, and the average project lifespan is 5 to 8 years. In addition, approximately $8.7 million has been authorized for use under this program, but has not yet been allocated to public libraries. 5 projects totaling nearly $1.7 million has been approved by the State Library Board and those libraries are obtaining their local funding, we must have allocated funding to remain intact as they continue to raise their matching local funds. The State Library anticipates 7 to 8 applications for these projects in FY24 and in 5 to 7 applications in FY25, including at least 5 $1 million project grants. Lastly, there is a library preservation facility. We have been approved for just over $10 million for a new library preservation facility, which will allow us to partner with academic libraries across Connecticut to transform the way that we preserve valuable materials and use our own existing library spaces to continue providing innovative services and facilities that meet the evolving needs of our scholarly, legal, and student communities. This project is in the early planning phase. No funds have yet been obligated or expended, but we anticipate full use of the approved amount in the next few years. So thank you for the opportunity to share the details of these projects with you, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Hey, so thank you so much for being here and for your informative presentation. I've got a couple of questions. What is the recent demand for public library grants? What does that look like?
I will answer shortly, and then I'm going to call on a member of my staff, Dawn Laval, to provide a more detailed answer. But we have continued to see consistent requests for these grants, particularly as many libraries have continued to age, as you heard about in the Capitol in the previous presentation. Libraries are funded at the local level, and those libraries are often very old and need to be renovated. So we see more, I would say we see more requests than we are able to provide funding. And so this is a very valued and used program of the state. We did see some dip during COVID because of the issues that were relevant because of that. But we do anticipate that we do see those numbers returning to normal. And we hope to be able to continue providing these projects for public libraries in the future. With that, that was kind of the overview, but I'll let Dawn give you a little more detailed answer on it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share some information about this incredible program. So prior to the pandemic, we had a significant number of projects on deck. The libraries that had submitted notices of intent to the state library for our construction grant program. The notice of intent numbers actually exceeded the available grant funds. So we would have had a very competitive grant process at that time. Now that we're coming out of the pandemic and those libraries are beginning to regain their footing, going back to the municipalities, going back to their foundations for their fundraising, we expect those projects that were originally on deck to come back aboard, and again having requests that exceed our current funding. What we have also seen in the pandemic is that libraries are rethinking their service, rethinking their space, as was mentioned in the previous testimony, installing hybrid OWL systems to provide programs hybrid, both in person and into their patrons' homes, exterior program space. So we're expecting our projects to get back on track to where they were prior to 2019.
Thank you for that answer. And do you have any possible information on what 2023 grants look like yet?
So 2023 grants, I have the expectation of probably having between 7 and 12 notice of intents. And the notice of intent is just what it is. We intend, this is what we're looking at, this is what we're thinking about. We won't know that until we get the actual, the applications. I see 23 being that bounce back year, fiscal year, and I see 2024 as being getting back to that competitive aspect of the grants, where we're going to have more applications and not just applications, but qualified applications that are going to exceed what we have in funding.
Okay, great. And my last question is, for example, in Waterbury, we often, especially during those hot summer days, use our library as a cooling center, right? For people who need that service. Is there any preference given to urban areas that really need that level of service with an HVAC upgrade?
Absolutely, and that's an excellent question. So what we have the category 1 grants, which are big renovations, they're new buildings, and then we have category 2 grants, which are maintenance, HVAC, conservation, emergency preparedness, and those are Waterbury, which is a distressed community, would qualify and have preference for those category 2 grants, which provides that ability for that, upgrading of HVAC, roof, elevators, and other maintenance and upgrading and just overall comfort within the library for your patrons.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Questions? Representative Senator Moore.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Deborah and Dawn. I am so fortunate to live in Bridgeport, where we have 6 libraries, 5 branches, 3 of them very new. I just attended a paint party at one of the libraries, so we use them a lot for the community to bring people together. And very nice, very well done. I appreciate having that. Sometimes it's really nice to be able to tell people, I'm so grateful that we have something in Bridgeport, but I go around and I visit all of them, and I see a lot of them being used for community. I have a couple of questions. So you said category 1 and category 2. Category 1 would be for brand new ground up construction.
So category 1 can be a brand new building, but it can also be a major renovation. So a certain percentage of the library building that's being renovated would qualify for a category 1. And really, we with the renovation, we use the cap of the $1 million. If a project is over $1 million and it's a renovation, it's a category 1.
And so if they needed more than $1 million for new, where would they go for that funding?
So we provide the $1 million, and the community is responsible for the match. So municipal libraries generally go through, either their capital budgeting, referendums. Libraries have foundations. They do a lot of fundraising. Non-municipal libraries, the association libraries, have very strong fundraising abilities. The libraries like New Canaan and Westport that have done major renovations over $25 million just have incredible fundraising apparatus. Unfortunately, in many cases, our distressed communities, Bridgeport, Waterbury, New Haven, do not have that capability. But in those cases, they get strong support from the municipalities, which comes through either the capital funding, the referendum, or their fundraising abilities.
So that $1 million that you're able to provide, do you have more ask than you have available funds?
So as I talked about earlier, back prior to the pandemic, we had a number of applications on deck that were exceeding our available funding, and that was the existing grant funding, the bond funding that we already had, as well as the projected yearly bond allocations for us. So at that point in time, it was going to be a competitive process because we had more applications than we had available funding.
And you still have those requests?
We see, I see those coming back. Again, those projects that were on deck were put to the side. Well, some of them were actually achieved through the pandemic, but the majority of them were put on the back burner. So I expect them to be resubmitted probably, if not in this fiscal year, in the next fiscal year.
So then I would ask you, the $1 million cap that you have right now, is that something that you think should be increased to be able to help more and get more done? And especially when you consider the rising cost of everything. I mean, I've been on bonding, and everyone's asking for a little bit more for a project that cost X amount of dollars pre-COVID. Now it's almost doubled. And so I'm looking at that $1 million wondering, really, is that enough?
I'm so happy that you asked that, Senator. That we had the same situation back in 2010 when the cap was 500,000. And, you know, costs were rising and it became apparent that 500,000 was really not going to get us anywhere. 1 million is kind of, if you look at a big project, it's a drop in the bucket. And with the, as we've seen, a lot of our libraries that are currently many of the 29 active projects are running into issues with not just supply side issues, but also the inflationary costs. You know, steel, insulation are increasing. Steel was going up, it was going down, it's going back up again. So a lot of these libraries are encountering those inflationary costs, which are creating an issue. But that said, for a big project, particularly for our distressed communities, 1 million is great, but then they have to come up with a match. Honestly, in this environment, this fiscal environment, the need of libraries they're not decreasing their space, they're expanding their space. Libraries are getting bigger for those community spaces, those community hubs, those community anchors. I honestly think that, you know, we should really, it would be wonderful for the committee and to consider perhaps raising that cap to 2 million for these big renovation, new building projects.
Thank you. And you know, well, that'll be a part of our discussion, because I see how important it is to the communities as a place to go. And it's utilized, all of them are utilized. I look at how long does it take to book a space, and you have to go from one library to another to find one that's available. So, you know, it's our dollars are being invested in a great way. And what I love about it is that everyone who wants to has an opportunity to participate in the libraries in whatever space they want. So thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Moore. Representative Wong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Ms. Shander. Thank you so much for your leadership for all of our libraries. Even though you have the title of state librarian, I know how much you work in collaborating with all of our libraries and all of our communities. And our libraries are a true treasure that sometimes gets taken for granted. And thank you for your leadership. Now, your focus on this is in regards to the Library Service Center. Is that a building that is owned by the state?
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for your very kind word. It's a pleasure to see you today. Yes, that is a building that is owned by the state. It is part of the state library's property in Middletown, and the Library Service Center is essentially a library for libraries. So Dawn is the director of the Division of Library Development, which includes this facility. And one of the things that we do is we recognize that libraries are not able to provide everything that they might need to be providing for their communities. So for example, we particularly focus on materials for story time for young learners that might cost a library significant amount of money to purchase if they had to buy all of the quantity they needed. If you think of one of my favorite things when I go to Middletown is looking at all of the puppets. If you have a library that is doing story time, working with young learners, and the amount of money it would cost them to buy all of those puppets to change them so that a student or a learner is not seeing them constantly is very high. And so what the Division of Library Development does, what the Middletown Library Service Center does, is we have a collection of those materials for items that libraries can borrow from us. And that's part of what we do. It's also the home for the Connecticut Library for Accessible Books, which serves our blind and low vision patrons. And this is a statewide national partnership with the Library of Congress. It's a mail order delivery service, and our headquarters is there in Middletown. And then we also are, as Dawn alluded to, we are a meeting space. We are a place where the library community can come together and have training and education for itself that we can continue to help keep up their own skills and understanding about the library profession. So that is essentially what the Library Center does, and it is owned, as you mentioned, by the state. Unfortunately, as an agency, we don't have capital funds within our budget to do some of these renovations ourselves, which is why this proposal is before you today.
I appreciate that. And as I listen to your struggles and challenges for this very important space that's owned by the state, is you kind of reflect the challenge and the struggles of so many of your member libraries, right? They're part of integral part of the community. Some of them can be dated. Some of them have maintenance and infrastructure deficiencies, but nevertheless, people just always presume that they're there. It's kind of fitting that you're looking at the Library Services Center that's managed by the state for the other libraries struggling through the same infrastructure problem. I want to move on to the construction grants. I don't think a lot of people understand how integral that is, given the struggles that we just talked about for your library services in Middletown and so many of our other libraries throughout the state. This grant has been oversubscribed, as I understand it, but it is innovative in the sense that it has a buy-in system for our municipalities, that you have a cap of up to $1 million, could be less, but those municipalities that receive this grant, and it's a very competitive grant, must match half of that. Who devised of that matching, kind of having an investment in this grant, but also how has it been oversubscribed? Because there's a true need from what I've been hearing.
Absolutely. So I will fortunately turn it back over to Dawn, who has more of the detailed history of that about the program.
So thank you again, Senator. And that's an excellent question. It's oversubscribed because, and you alluded to it, that libraries are essentially in a position that we're not, that they do not have those capital funds to improve their facilities. It's important to know that in Connecticut, a lot of our library buildings are pre-1970. And we have many library buildings that are actually Carnegie buildings. So these are very old, dated, and I'll use the Fairfield Library as an example. The Fairfield Library is the main library is essentially 3 separate buildings patched together. There, the original building, then another renovation, causing complications with HVAC and things of that nature. But as libraries, the need for libraries is expanding, and we're not just books anymore. We're programs, we're community resources. We're in the summertime, many libraries are community lunch. They provide the free lunches for children who are out of school. They provide space for the community organizations and many things like that. The need is expanding. And oftentimes in their communities, libraries are at the bottom of the list for capital improvement. They take a back seat to very important public safety, very important other organizations. But what we know is that libraries are essential in their communities. Libraries were essential during the pandemic. Libraries while they didn't have their doors open, they were providing curbside service. And many libraries actually created drive-throughs. So the need for libraries in many communities, and it's across the demographic spectrum. It's not just the distressed communities. It's every community is seeing the value of their libraries, and the need is expanding. But the funding's not there, the space is not there. And again, going back to the need to redesign for flexible modular space, to redesign for more energy efficient space, to redesign for, hybrid programming, to create more conducive environments, conducive to collaboration is very important. And it costs money. And the need, the oversubscribing to our grant is because the need is there. The fact that we give these grants is an incentive to municipalities to invest in their library, that, they're going to get $1 million from the state of Connecticut to build a new building. And that's an incredible incentive to serve their communities.
Thank you. Libraries to me is the ultimate equalizer. It's a bedrock of knowledge and resource information. And our libraries have been transformative in light of COVID and new technologies. But one of the questions I have in regards to equity and fairness is, can you give an example if any such grants been given to our urban communities, like in New Haven, Bridgeport, Hartford, Waterbury? Any such grant that you can cite as an example for a community that is looking to adapt their outdated aging libraries to kind of reflect as a haven for the resources that you mentioned. Because I remember hearing one thing, it's one of the most active English as a second language educator in various urban communities. Can you elaborate a little bit if any of these grants have been used to help urban facilities, urban libraries be able to adapt and service the community?
Absolutely. So I'll give you a perfect example. Hartford had recently opened their Park Street branch, which is in a community, and it's the Park Street Lyric. It was actually formerly a theater. But that's a community in Hartford that did not have a library. And what we know about urban libraries and the need for them, there's plenty of branches. What the issue is the ability for somebody to physically get to that library. So it's important that libraries are in the community. So Hartford has had several grants, $1 million grants to improve these branches within these underserved, these library deserts within the cities. And going back to Bridgeport is another community that has been a recipient of several grants to improve their branches that serve, again, these communities that did not have access, did not have an easy bus route to the main library. So the urban libraries have greatly benefited from this grant program.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the great work that you all do on behalf of all the libraries in the state. And I wish you the greatest success. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Any further questions? Representative Farr.
Hello, thanks for being here. I appreciate all of the conversation on the libraries. It just reminds me of how much I wanted to be a librarian when I was a kid. So there's still hope for me. I did have a question about the grants, and I appreciate all of the focus on that because I agree with so many of my colleagues and their questions there. I know we've been especially chatting about our distressed municipalities, but could you clarify? I know in the language you mentioned that preference is given to distressed municipalities and then to principal public libraries. What is that refer to?
Absolutely. So principal public library is a term that is in our statutes, and it is a way for a municipality to designate a particular library in their community as their principal library, their main library. And there is potentially funding or grant opportunity that is available through that source. In some cases, we have towns that have multiple library systems or used to in the past, and it was a way to designate which library in the community was its essentially its principal or main facility. Dawn, do you want to add anything to that?
So absolutely, yes, that the principal libraries is within statute. So when we assess grants, we have a criteria. So and in many cases, more so the preference to distressed communities is with the category 2 grants for building maintenance for things of that nature. When we get to the competitiveness of the, again, going back to pre-pandemic, when we had more applications than we had funding, we have basically an assessment categorization of how we rate, basically we score the grants. And certainly being in a distressed community gives a certain number of points towards that assessment. It's an equity of fairness for the ability of a community to raise money for the libraries, but it's within a process that we follow. And that really kicks in when we have the number of applications that exceed what we have in our entire grant funding pool.
Thank you for that. I appreciate the follow-up and for giving us so much more detail on this grant program. And I appreciate your willingness. I'm sure if we have other questions to follow up. So thank you. Thank you to the chairman.
Thank you for your questions. Are there any further questions? Representative Veach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a very quick question. Thank you for the testimony. It's been very informative. Under the area of the just below the HVAC, you've mentioned doors and electrical and restrooms in this Middletown facility. The restrooms, you say that you're going to be proposing to expand the women's restroom by limiting the men's restroom and including an ADA stall. Is this going to be for, I guess, what they consider a family restroom now? Is it a single room or is it several rooms? Can you just clarify that, please?
So I can clarify that we actually have a women's restroom and men's restroom, and we have a ADA compliant restroom. And the intention with that is to move the men's restroom to the ADA restroom and expand and enlarge the women's restroom to include that ADA facility within that. Then the area of space for where the men's restroom will be moved is also big enough to ensure that that is ADA compliant too. So it's essentially creating a men's and women's restroom, both of which have their own ADA compliant stalls.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies it. The way I was reading, I'm like, okay, so where are the guys going to be?
That was a great question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Everything was very, very good. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Rep. Piscopo.
Thank you, and Mr. Chairman, and thank you for coming or for showing up on Zoom, I guess. I appreciate it. My colleagues have asked all the questions, so I really have nothing to add. Just a simple, if you will, are you making, I don't see your requests in this budget, agency requests. I see the 400 million agency requests, but when we go down to the construction aspect of your capital budget, you haven't made any requests there. And in the grants and aid for your energy conservation and ADA provisions, there's no requests there. Are you going to do that with present unallocated funds? Is the reason why you haven't made the request?
Yes, particularly with the construction grants, it's unallocated funds that we currently have.
Great. Thank you for that concise answer just before 4 o'clock. I appreciate you coming in. I wish it was in person, by the way, but I understand.
Absolutely. We weren't able to get over in time. Apologize for that.
100%. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Mrs. Shander and Ms. LaValle. Thank you so much for your testimony today. It was informative. And, look, libraries are vital to our communities and they provide an important service for everybody. And, we thank you for being in the vanguard of that and making sure that they have the resources they need to be successful. So thanks again for your efforts.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us to 3:55, and I want to thank everyone so much for staying on schedule. I also want to thank Bree and Ash from Finance, Revenue, and Bonding, our clerks for today, who did a great job. I also want to thank Eric Gray, who helped us put this together. He's a little under the weather today, but he is watching CTN very closely, and I'm sure that's helping with his recovery. Senator Wong.
Thank you for the permission to speak after you, Chair, but I wanted to take a moment to compliment you for your first chairing of the subcommittee. You were gracious, you were diplomatic, and you were extremely productive. I'm very appreciative, and I wanted to publicly acknowledge and say thank you.
Thank you for the nice words, Senator. Just some housekeeping rules. March 20th at 10 a.m. is our next meeting, and our last meeting is March 27th at 10 a.m. Senator Moore, did you have a few comments?
I just want to compliment you. Job well done. I appreciate you all being there, and hopefully I'll make the next one and I'll be in Hartford with you. So thank you. Thank you to everyone who supported this. Also, I think we stayed on time. Great questions, good responses, and I think it's a great start. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much, Senator. Is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a second? All in favor? All right. Thanks, everybody.